Hi guys! Welcome to a journey back in time. Tonight, we'll step inside the cold stone walls of medieval castles, where people slept beneath heavy furs and flickering firelight fought against the endless winter. Imagine the creak of wood, the whisper of wind, and the quiet breath of those who endured the dark. This isn't just a story about how they stayed warm. It's about resilience, hope, and the small miracles of survival. So grab a blanket, sit close to the fire, and let's travel together into the heart of a medieval night. You step into the castle as dusk gives way to night. The air itself feels ancient, thick, mineral, and cold enough to bite. The torches along the corridor flare and hiss, their light trembling against the damp stone. Each footstep you take answers back with an echo that disappears into darkness, swallowed by walls built for war, not warmth. The place smells faintly of smoke, wet wool, and the centuries. You can almost hear the whisper of drafts sneaking through the arrow slits, the sigh of the castle exhaling frost. It's easy to picture this place as romantic, turrets gleaming under moonlight, banners fluttering above proud battlements. But once you're inside, away from the safety of imagination, the truth presses against you like the cold itself. The walls are 12 feet thick and colder than the grave. They have absorbed winters for hundreds of years and now radiate that memory back into your skin. There's no escaping it. Every breath fogs. Every sound feels sharper, as though the air itself has turned to glass. The hall you cross is vast, but emptiness magnifies the chill. Somewhere above, a shutter bangs open, and the wind rushes through the high rafters like a ghost. You pull your cloak tighter. The flicker of flame offers no comfort. Firelight here is decorative, not defensive. It throws wild shapes across the flagstones, but gives off surprisingly little heat. You understand, perhaps for the first time, why survival in a castle required more than courage. It demanded invention. The castle does not care about your warmth. It was never designed for human comfort. Its builders thought only of defense, of siege and stone, of enemies and endurance. They raised towers to watch the horizon, not to keep families cozy at night. Everything about the structure is an insult to softness, the hard floor, the high ceilings, the narrow windows that trade sunlight for security. Even the silence feels armed. You try to imagine what it was like for those who called this fortress home centuries ago. Knights, ladies, servants, all bound by the same cold that seeps into your bones now. The difference between rank and suffering shrinks in places like this. Stone doesn't care about your title. It only remembers temperature. Down the corridor, a faint glow suggests the great hall, the only room where warmth still dares to live. The rest of the castle is a labyrinth of frost. You run a hand along the wall as you pass. Moisture gathers on your glove like condensation on a cellar door. The stones are slick, sweating cold. Even now, after centuries, they hold the climate of a tomb. Some historians argue that castles were marvels of power, but disasters of comfort. And they're right. The same walls that repelled arrows also trapped damp air. Without insulation, without glass, without mercy. It's said that even in the heart of winter, frost sometimes formed on the inside of bedchamber walls. Imagine waking up to find your curtains stiff with ice, or your wash basin frozen solid beside the bed. That wasn't misfortune. That was normal. But in that harshness lies the story's heartbeat. Because people survived here, not by defeating the cold, but by learning to live with it. They layered their world, rushes on the floor, tapestries on the walls, wool over linen, fur over wool. They turned sleep itself into an act of engineering. The bed became a fortress inside the fortress, the fire a ritual of defiance. The chill pressed in from every side. Yet every night they found ways to carve small pockets of warmth out of the impossible. You pause in the corridor, listening. The castle breathes, the crackle of torches, the creak of timber, the distant bark of a dog in the courtyard below. All around, the night deepens, and you realize that for medieval people, darkness was not an absence of light. It was an environment. It shaped their behavior, their rituals, even their sense of hope. The coming of night meant surrendering to cold, but also to trust in blankets, in fire, in one another. When you finally step into the great hall, the glow hits you like revelation. The vast hearth blazes in the center, a furious orange heart beating against the stone ribs of the castle. Men and women cluster near it, hands outstretched, faces flushed from heat and drink. Beyond the circle of firelight, shadows cling like frost. The further from the hearth, the quicker the warmth dies. Yet for now, this space feels alive, the one fragile island of comfort in an ocean of cold. You take a deep breath. The smell of burning oak mixes with roasted meat and damp wool. For a moment, you feel almost safe, almost warm. But you already know what awaits when the fire dies down, the long climb up the spiral stair to your chamber, the chill that waits like a predator in the dark. Tonight, as in every medieval night, warmth is fleeting, borrowed rather than owned. And so begins the story of how people slept in these stone fortresses, not peacefully, not easily, but ingeniously. Against the siege of winter, they built rituals instead of walls, habits instead of comfort. Every flicker of heat was a victory, every dream a rebellion against the cold. The echoes in stone are not just of footsteps and wind. They are of endurance itself, whispering through the centuries, "We survived this." The great hall fades behind you as you climb the narrow spiral stair, each step colder than the last. The air changes thinner, sharper, carrying the scent of wet stone and smoke long gone cold. The torch in your hand sputters, its light licking the curved walls. Every turn of the stair feels like descending into ice rather than ascending to rest. You reach a landing, a heavy wooden door bound with iron, and when you push it open, the draft hits you like a slap. This is the castle's truth, a chamber meant for sleep that feels more like the inside of a glacier. The first thing you notice is the silence. It isn't peaceful. It's the kind of silence that presses against your ears, thickened by cold air. The walls here are massive, 12 feet of solid stone meant to keep armies out. Yet they let the winter in as if it were smoke. They breathe, but what they exhale is frost. Moisture gathers on the inner surface, glittering faintly in the torchlight like a thin skin of diamonds. When you touch it, the chill bites straight through your glove. The castle itself feels alive, not with warmth or heart, but with a slow, unrelenting pulse of cold that seeps into everything. Historians call it thermal inertia, though the people who lived here never used such words. They just knew that stone remembers. It absorbs heat during the day, not much, but enough to tease you with hope, and releases it long after the fire dies, in sighs of damp, freezing breath. To live within such walls was to live inside a memory of winter that never ended. You move closer to the hearth, hoping for relief, but even that betrays you. The fire burns bright, yet its warmth barely reaches your knees. The rest of the chamber remains locked in an icy stillness. The heat doesn't spread, it climbs. You can feel it rise toward the ceiling, leaving you to shiver in the draft below. Someone once said a castle fire is like a sun glimpsed through clouds, visible, glorious, and impossibly far away. You kneel and extend your hands toward the flames. The air between you and the hearth shimmers, and for a moment you feel your skin again. But behind you, the cold already gathers, sliding across the floor like mist. You turn, and your breath hangs in the air. Even with fire, the chamber remains two climates stitched together, a fragile oasis of heat surrounded by an empire of frost. Contemporary letters tell of nobles waking to frost etched on their bed curtains, of servants cracking ice from wash basins before dawn. In one French record, a traveler wrote that he could see his breath by candlelight even while lying beneath firs. Another, more bitterly, called his host's castle a stone coffin with torches. Their exaggerations weren't exaggerations at all. You begin to notice the little details that reveal a lifetime of adaptation. The floor is covered with rushes, dry reeds scattered thick, to soften footsteps and insulate against the stone. Mixed among them are herbs, lavender, rosemary, and mint. The scent is faint but deliberate, a small rebellion against the smell of damp and decay. You can almost hear the echo of a servant's broom sweeping new rushes across the floor. The whisper of leaves replaced every few months. Beneath them, the floor stays dry a little longer, only a little. The walls, meanwhile, wear tapestries not merely for beauty, but for survival. Heavy weaves of wool and silk, embroidered with scenes of hunts or saints, hang from iron rods. They billow slightly when the draft pushes through cracks in the stone. For a moment you might think them breathing too, alive with motion. Some scholars debate whether these hangings truly trapped heat or whether the belief itself offered more comfort than the fabric. But when you press your hand behind one, the air there is still, and stillness in a place like this is warmth. The chamber's windows tell their own story. Narrow arrow slits have been widened into awkward rectangles, and across one you see a translucent film stretched tight, not glass, but oiled linen. It glows faintly gold in the torchlight, a membrane against the storm. The wind rattles the wooden frame, frost feathers creep along the sill. Even so, you're grateful for this crude defense. Without it, the night air would pour in freely, whistling through your dreams. Imagine trying to sleep here after the fire dies. The cold doesn't wait. It moves through your blankets, up through the mattress, into your bones. You would wake to find your breath crystallized on the pillow, your hair stiff with frost. The walls sweat moisture by day and freeze by night, forming thin icicles that drip onto the rushes below. The sound, slow, irregular, eternal, is the castle's heartbeat. And yet there is beauty in this misery. The moonlight sneaks through a crack in the shutter and spills across the wall, pale as milk. The tapestry's colors fade in the glow, turning huntsmen into ghosts. Somewhere outside, the wind moans through the battlements, and for a moment it sounds almost human. You realize the people who lived here didn't just fight the cold, they lived within its music. The creak of timber, the whisper of drafts, the hush between gusts, all of it became the rhythm of their nights. You draw closer to the bed, the centerpiece of the room. Its frame towers high, carved oak darkened by centuries of smoke. Heavy curtains hang from the canopy, and when you brush them aside, dust shivers in the air. Inside lies a hollow of darkness, a promise of warmth, perhaps, or a trap for cold. Either way, it's where you'll have to make your stand. The walls breathe frost, but you, too, can breathe. You will layer yourself in linen, wool, and fur. You will close the curtains tight. You will trust that the faint glow of embers will hold through the night. That is what every medieval sleeper learned. Comfort is not granted, it is built. Stone can steal your heat, but not your will. As you lay a hand on the wall one last time, it feels as if the castle itself inhales. The chill runs up your arm like a warning, or perhaps a welcome. You withdraw, step back toward the bed, and understand the true battle of the medieval night was not fought with swords, but with breath. The fortress outside kept enemies away. The fortress within kept life burning through the dark. The fire has burned low. Its once booming roar has softened into a weary sigh, and the light that filled the chamber now flickers uncertainly across the walls. You watch as the final logs split and crumble into embers, red veins pulsing weakly in the ash. The warmth you had gathered moments ago begins to dissolve, draining away as though the stone itself is feeding on it. That's the cruel paradox of a castle. It devours heat faster than you can make it. You shift closer to the hearth, desperate to capture the last of the glow. It's a losing fight. The air behind you has already turned against you, creeping up your spine in thin, invisible tendrils. The warmth doesn't fade gently. It vanishes, snatched from your skin, leaving behind that sharp, metallic sting of cold air against flesh. You rub your hands together, but even friction fails here. The cold is too big, too patient, too alive. For the people who lived here centuries ago, This nightly moment was familiar and dreaded. They called it the dying of the fire, a phrase both literal and spiritual. When the flames sank, so did morale. The castle that had felt briefly human, filled with laughter, music, and color, reverted to what it truly was, a machine of stone designed for endurance, not warmth. You picture the servants moving quickly before that transformation completes. They bank the fire, pressing ash over embers to keep them smoldering until dawn. They collect the scraps of wood for the next day's burning, muttering quietly as their breath clouds the air. Every gesture is practical, learned through generations of survival. And yet there's something ritualistic about it too, a tiny ceremony of defiance, as if to say, "We will have heat again tomorrow." The nobles withdraw to their chambers, layered in robes and cloaks. The servants retreat to alcoves near the kitchen, where the warmth lingers a little longer. Somewhere, a child whimpers from the cold, and a mother pulls him close under a mound of coarse blankets. Each life in the castle carries out the same choreography, the same attempt to hold onto the day's final trace of comfort. Historians debate how effective these fires really were. Some claim that a large hearth could warm a great hall for hours. Others insist that within minutes of the flames dying, the room reverted to near outdoor temperatures. Both are true in their way. The heat radiated outward in a small bubble, but the rest of the space, those vast, echoing ceilings, swallowed it. Without insulation, the warmth escaped upward, sucked through the chimney like a soul ascending. There's a strange beauty in watching it happen. The embers wink like tiny stars, one by one dimming, until the hearth becomes a small galaxy fading into the dark. You realize that for the medieval sleeper, fire was more than light, it was time itself. The night stretched as long as the fire survived. Once it died, so did the illusion of safety. A traveler once wrote of this sensation: "The warmth clings to you like a memory, and then deserts you as though you had dreamed it." You understand exactly what he meant. The moment the heat leaves your skin, you feel a kind of betrayal, as though the fire has broken a promise. You pull your cloak tighter and step back from the hearth. The cold rushes in instantly to claim the empty space, wrapping around your legs, filling your lungs with that heavy, damp chill. The smell changes too. Gone is the sweetness of burning wood. What remains is the sour tang of smoke trapped in wool, the breath of centuries lingering in the walls. In the great hall, this nightly death of warmth played out like a performance. The fire blazed for the feast, its heat swelling the room with life and laughter, and then slowly dwindled as guests departed. Minstrels stopped playing, dogs curled by the ashes, and servants dozed against the benches. Within an hour, the same hall that had throbbed with noise turned into a frozen cavern again. The warmth hadn't just vanished physically, it had drained from the spirit of the place. And yet, people adapted. They learned to anticipate the vanishing. They didn't curse it, not aloud at least. Instead, they prepared for it, planned around it, turned it into a rhythm. Fires were fed in cycles. Beds were layered in anticipation. Clothes were hung near the hearth during supper, so that when worn later, they carried a ghost of warmth into the night. Every act was a negotiation with the inevitable. You imagine one last figure still awake, sitting by the fading fire, a guard too tired to climb the tower, or a lord lost in thought. He watches the embers pulse in silence. The cold encroaches inch by inch, but he stays. Perhaps he finds comfort in the way the fire mirrors his own endurance, stubborn, flickering, but not yet gone. In that moment, he isn't thinking of battles or banners or God. He's thinking only of warmth, that most human of desires, simple yet unreachable in a place built of stone. Outside, the wind howls across the battlements, scraping against the shutters. Somewhere in the courtyard, water freezes in a bucket, the crackling sound almost delicate. You realize that in this world, everything is alive except comfort. Warmth is a visitor, never a resident. Soon the last ember dims. The castle exhales a long, quiet sigh. Darkness folds over the room like a shroud. The heat has vanished, but the memory remains, glowing faintly in your bones, reminding you of what was, and what will return when dawn brings another fire. In that fragile memory lies the heart of medieval resilience. They didn't live for comfort. They lived for the brief moments between cold, for the heat that always vanished, and the hope that always returned. You linger by the dying hearth, unwilling to let go of its fading light. Around you, the great hall empties, voices fade, footsteps echo, and the last servants snuff out candles one by one. The warmth retreats with them, until only you and the sound of your own breath remain. Then comes the moment you've been dreading all evening, the walk to bed. In a medieval castle, that short journey feels like crossing a mountain pass in winter. The distance might be only a few corridors, a stairwell or two, but it is a voyage through darkness, wind, and silence. You pull your cloak tight and step away from the hearth. Immediately the air thickens colder, heavier. The shadows at the edge of the room swallow the last glow of firelight. Your boots scrape against stone worn smooth by centuries of feet. Each step echoes, a hollow reminder of how vast this place truly is. The great hall behind you still carries the ghost of warmth, but the corridor ahead might as well be carved from ice. The temperature drops so quickly it takes your breath. A torch burns faintly in an iron sconce. Its flame struggles against the draft, bending almost flat before flaring up again. The air smells of smoke, damp wool, and the faint tang of iron. A servant once said that you could tell how close you were to your chamber by the way your breath sounded. In the great hall, it came out soft and invisible, halfway up the stairs. It puffed white and thick, a signal that warmth was gone. You start to climb. The staircase spirals upward, narrow and steep. Every turn carries you deeper into the cold. The walls sweat moisture that freezes along the mortar, forming tiny ridges that glitter in the torchlight. Your fingers brush the stones and come away wet, then numb. The torchlight dances in strange ways here, twisting shadows into shapes that look like faces staring down from the curve of the wall. The higher you climb, the worse the wind becomes. The castle was designed this way on purpose. Narrow arrow slits to catch the draft and vent smoke, open shafts that let air move through. It was brilliant for defense, disastrous for sleep. You reach a landing and pass a narrow window, only a slit of darkness against the night. The wind whistles through it like a flute. Somewhere far below, you hear a door slam shut, a sound that reverberates up the entire tower like a heartbeat. The torch guttering in your hand flares once, twice, then steadies. You pause to catch your breath. The cold finds the gap at your neck and slides down your spine like a blade. You mutter a curse, half prayer, half growl, the kind every medieval soul must have whispered countless times before, "God keep me warm until morning." You press on. The door to your chamber stands ahead, heavy oak bound with iron. When you push it open, it groans in protest, a sound deep enough to make the air vibrate. The draft rushes out to greet you, not a breeze, but a force, a presence that fills the room. Your torch flame bends backward. The chamber beyond is a study in shadows, the cold gleam of the bedposts, the shimmer of frost along the windowsill, the dull reflection of iron hinges. You shut the door quickly, though it hardly helps. The wind still sneaks through the cracks. The torchlight reveals the faint mist of your breath floating before your face. You could swear the air itself smells frozen, a mixture of wet stone and extinguished fire. You set the torch in its holder and pull your cloak tighter. The silence presses in again, a silence so complete that you can hear the wood in the furniture contracting with the cold. It's in this moment that medieval people faced their nightly reckoning. No matter how grand your title, no matter how heavy your blankets, you still had to confront the same ritual, leaving behind the illusion of warmth and entering the kingdom of frost. Chroniclers wrote of it as though it were a passage between worlds. One monk described walking to his bed as a pilgrimage of breath, another as the test by which God reminded us we were mortal. It was the most ordinary act, and yet the most profound. You move toward the bed. The mattress, raised high on carved legs, looms in the half-light. Its canopy curtains hang motionless, stiff with cold. You brush a hand against them and feel frost along the edge, a delicate lace of ice where condensation has frozen. The bed is both promise and punishment, soft within, frigid without. Before climbing in, you cross to the hearth in the corner. The fire there is nearly gone, just a few embers left, glowing faintly like animal eyes. You kneel to stir them, hoping for a final breath of warmth. The coals crackle weakly, releasing a thin wisp of smoke that curls toward the ceiling. For a moment, it feels as though the fire sighs at your effort, grateful but resigned. You add a stick, watch it catch reluctantly, and then stand back. Behind you, the bed waits. Its curtains seem to draw you in, whispering of warmth you know isn't real. Still, you move toward it. The floorboards creak beneath your boots. The rushes scattered there release a faint scent of dried herbs, lavender, maybe, or thyme, ghosts of summer gathered against the winter's bite. You lift the curtain and peer inside. The darkness is thick, but the bedding glows faintly pale in the torchlight. You slip one foot inside, then the other. The linen is icy against your skin, the straw mattress stiff beneath you. For a moment, your body tenses violently, rejecting the shock. Then instinct takes over. You pull the blankets, draw the curtains, curl inward, and wait for the faint heat of your breath to build its fragile shelter. It's not comfort, it's survival. Outside, the wind growls along the battlements. You hear a distant door creak, then slam. Somewhere a dog barks once, then is silent. In that soundscape of stone and air, you finally understand why the walk to bed was a ritual of courage. It wasn't just the distance that mattered. It was the knowledge that warmth would abandon you the moment you left the fire. Every night in a castle meant facing that loss, again and again, with nothing but faith and furs to protect you. You close your eyes. The torch burns low, and the chamber settles into darkness. The castle exhales another gust through the cracks, and your curtains tremble. The cold is still here, pressing its claim against your skin. But you're here too, breathing, enduring, defying. The journey is done. The war with the night has only just begun. The first shock of cold fades into a dull ache, replaced by the slow awareness of everything touching your skin: linen, wool, fur, the weight of survival itself. The medieval bed was not a single object, but an invention, a fortress built layer upon layer, designed to trap the last whisper of warmth before it fled into the stone. As you lie there, you begin to understand the genius and the desperation that shaped it. The bottom layer is the straw mattress, the base upon which all else rests. Peasants might have used oat straw, nobles preferred barley or wheat, softer, cleaner, replaced often to ward off damp. The smell of straw lingers faintly, sweet and earthy. You can feel the unevenness beneath the linen sheet, small ridges pressing against your shoulder blades. In summer, it would have been tolerable. In winter, it becomes a fragile barrier between body and frost rising from the stone floor. Above the straw lies a featherbed, for those wealthy enough to afford it. The feathers shift as you move, whispering softly, a living cushion that sighs with every breath. But even feathers can freeze if the air around them turns to ice. That's why the layering continues: sheets of linen, blankets of wool, heavy furs laid one atop another until the weight pins you in place. Each layer holds not comfort, but purpose: to keep the cold from reaching your skin, to keep your heat from escaping into the walls. Linen is always the first touch. Cool, smooth, and clean. It was prized not for warmth but for hygiene, the single luxury even the poor tried to imitate. Over goes the wool blanket, coarse and dense, smelling faintly of sheep and smoke. Wool breathes, they used to say. It traps heat without suffocating it. Then come the furs: fox, wolf, bear if you were rich, rabbit, or dog if you were not. They lie heavy and inert, yet the moment you pull them close, they seem to come alive, their softness radiating the memory of another creature's warmth. The medieval sleeper slept not under fabric, but under history. Each material told a story: linen from flax fields harvested in late summer, wool spun in winter by candlelight, fur from the hunt that marked the turning of the season. To cover oneself was to wrap in the labor of 100 unseen hands. As the weight settles, your breathing grows shallow. The furs press down like armor. You can barely move. But that's part of the design. Movement lets the cold in. You're meant to lie still, conserving heat the way a banked fire conserves flame. Couples huddled close in these beds, limbs entwined beneath layers that weighed as much as a person. Solitude was a privilege of rank, but warmth was a democracy of flesh. Even the proudest lord sometimes shared his bed with servants, children, or hounds. You reach up and touch the canopy curtain above your head. The fabric is thick, woven from wool and lined with linen. When pulled tight, it forms a miniature room, a pocket of captured breath, a bubble of human weather inside the frozen castle. That's what the canopy was for, not beauty, but insulation. Curtains stopped the drafts that crept through the shutters, turned the bed into a self-contained world. Inside, your exhaled air softened the chill outside. Frost gathered silently on the wood. Historians call it the microclimate of the bed, and it's an oddly modern phrase for something so primal. The people of the Middle Ages knew it instinctively. They built warmth the way their ancestors built walls, layer by layer, fiber by fiber, defending against an enemy that could never be defeated, only delayed. The details varied by class, of course. A lord's bed might be hung with crimson velvet embroidered with gold thread, its sheets perfumed with rose water, its furs lined with silk. A servant's pallet in the corner would be a sack of straw under a wool cloak. But in both cases, the principle was the same: to make a fortress of fabric around a body that refused to surrender to the cold. There was something almost spiritual in it. Each night, people climbed into these layered cocoons as if entering a ritual space. They undressed in stages, keeping on nightshirts, socks, and caps. Then they drew the curtains and disappeared, swallowed by the folds of linen and fur. Outside, the wind moaned through the cracks. Inside, breath and heartbeat became the only sounds. You lie still and listen. The layers around you muffle everything: footsteps in the corridor, the sigh of the fire. The castle's great lungs continue to breathe their frost, but you've carved out a pocket of warmth, small but real. You imagine 1,000 others doing the same throughout history, each of them huddled under their own fortress of fabric, dreaming the same fragile dream of heat. And yet, this fortress had its weaknesses. Too close to the wall, and frost crept in. Too close to the hearth, and sparks could leap onto the bedding, a danger that turned sleep into gamble. Many fires began this way, from embers carried by a draft into curtains or furs. Even the comfort of warmth could become the agent of ruin. Survival required balance, enough heat to live, not enough to burn. Still, there is tenderness in this act of layering. Each fold of fabric is a gesture of care, a servant preparing the bed for their master, a mother tucking a child beneath a quilt, a husband adjusting the furs so his wife won't shiver. In the stillness of the medieval night, warmth was a form of love, expressed through weight and texture, not words. The bed creaks softly as you settle deeper. The layers have done their work. The air inside the curtains grows warmer, your breath turning the chill into mist. The fortress holds, for now. But you know the battle is only beginning. Outside these folds, the castle waits, vast and patient, its walls thirsting for heat. You close your eyes and draw the furs tighter, hearing in the darkness not silence, but the hum of endurance, the song of fabric fighting frost. Night after night, century after century, the curtains breathe with you. When you exhale, they stir faintly inward, as if inhaling your warmth. When you breathe in again, They sway outward, whispering secrets to the frozen air beyond. Inside this small enclosure, time slows. The cold outside the fabric feels distant, as though the castle itself has receded. You've entered another world, one stitched together by linen and wool, a world where survival depends on the delicate boundary between breath and frost. The canopy bed was the castle's most ingenious invention. From the outside it looked grand, a symbol of status with its carved posts and embroidered hangings. But its true brilliance was invisible. It transformed an unheated stone room into a personal climate. The curtains were more than decoration. They were armor against the wind. You reach up and trace the fabric with your fingers. It's rough but dense, the weave tight enough to trap air. When drawn, these curtains created a kind of cocoon, keeping the sleeper's breath circulating within. After an hour, the space inside grew warmer by several degrees. It was still cold by any modern standard, but compared to the icy air of the room, it was paradise. In noble households, the curtains might be lined with velvet or fur, their edges stitched with gold thread. In simpler homes, they were made of coarse wool or linen dyed in earthy tones. But no matter the color or texture, they all served the same sacred purpose: to hold warmth. Even the poorest peasant, sleeping behind a hanging cloth instead of true drapes, understood this principle, that survival was a matter of boundaries. Outside your little cocoon, the night continues its siege. The castle walls pop and sigh as the cold tightens the stone. Somewhere beyond the curtains, a drop of melted frost falls from the ceiling and lands on the rushes with a soft hiss. You can hear the faint creak of wood in the rafters, the moan of wind through the chimney. The world out there is immense and merciless. Inside, you are just a fragile spark wrapped in cloth. You think of the servants who prepared this space hours earlier. They would have drawn the bed hangings before their lord retired, checking for drafts, smoothing the sheets, perhaps even warming them with a metal pan filled with coals. The smell of ash and iron lingers faintly in the air. If they did their job well, the heat from that ritual still hides somewhere between the blankets. If not, the chill will reclaim it before dawn. The canopy curtains did more than trap warmth. They offered privacy, a rare luxury in a world of communal living. Within these folds, one could pray, weep, or whisper secrets unseen. They muffled sound, softened light, turned the bed into a confessional. In the echoing chambers of a castle, such intimacy was precious. Behind the curtains, the lord and lady could speak freely, share the weight of the day, or simply lie side by side listening to the wind. For those of lower rank, curtains had different meanings. In servants' quarters, a hanging sheet between pallets created the illusion of solitude. In monasteries, thin partitions allowed monks to retreat into silence without ever truly being alone. Even in the poorest cottages, a piece of cloth hung before a bed offered the comfort of separation, a small defense against the vastness of the world. You draw your own curtains tighter, pulling them closed against a sudden gust. The air outside moves like a living thing, pressing against the fabric, searching for a way in. For a moment you imagine the castle as a giant lung, the wind inhaling through the cracks, the walls exhaling frost. Every draft that slips beneath the curtains feels like a probing finger, testing your defenses. And then comes the sound, the faint tapping of frost crystals forming along the inside of the linen. The moisture from your breath condenses, freezes, turns to glittering lace. The curtains themselves begin to change, growing stiff and cold near the edges. You reach out and touch them. They crunch softly beneath your fingertips. Even the fortress has limits, yet the feeling isn't despair, it's awe. These people, living centuries before insulation and heating, faced this same intrusion every night and still found rest. They didn't conquer the cold, they negotiated with it. They built small sanctuaries, fabric fortresses where breath and body heat formed alliances against the elements. It was a kind of quiet heroism, repeated endlessly, unnoticed by history. You lie back, listening. Beyond the curtains, the castle groans. The fire in the hearth coughs out its final breath, leaving only the red pulse of embers. The sound of wind replaces all others, long, low, eternal. Inside, you are enclosed in the muted hush of fabric and warmth. It's fragile, yes, but it's yours. You close your eyes and think of how this ritual repeated through centuries. Mothers tucking children under wool, soldiers sleeping beneath cloaks, monks pulling rough curtains across their cells. Each one believed in the power of fabric to hold the night at bay. Perhaps that belief itself was part of the warmth. A shiver passes through you as a new gust tests the seams of your refuge. But the curtains hold. Their weave hums faintly with tension, like the string of a bow drawn against the cold. You breathe again, slow and steady, and the air grows a fraction softer. The fortress endures. The night continues. Between breath and frost, a fragile truce holds, and that, in the medieval world, was all anyone ever needed. The bed creaks beneath you as the weight of the furs settles, and your thoughts drift toward what lies underneath. The hidden layers that separate your body from the stone, cold floor. Down here, beneath the silks and wool, beneath the velvet curtains that keep the night at bay, lies something humbler, older, and far more essential: straw and feather, the true foundation of every medieval bed. You shift slightly, and the sound reaches your ears, a faint rustle, a sigh of stalks rubbing together. The straw mattress beneath you breathes when you move, whispering of harvest fields and sun, warmed meadows long gone. Each stalk was once green and living, cut in autumn, dried in barns, bundled, then stuffed into a linen sack known as a tick. This was the first line of defense against the cold floor, and sometimes the only one. For peasants, the tick might be filled with whatever material was available: straw, hay, dried reeds, even bracken from the forest floor. It was cheap, replaceable, and alive with texture. In the dead of winter, it trapped a thin cushion of air between body and earth, a modest insulation that made the difference between shivering and sleeping. But straw had its price. It crunched, it shifted, it flattened, and it needed changing often. Many families burned their old straw in spring, both to banish the lice it collected and to celebrate the promise of warmth returning to the land. For nobles, the humble straw mattress was only the beginning. Upon it sat a featherbed, soft, pliant, luxurious beyond measure. Goose feathers were prized, their downy plumes light enough to float yet dense enough to cradle. Swan's feathers were rarer still, reserved for royalty. To lie on a featherbed was to sink into the breath of birds, into clouds of captured air that remembered flight. But even these sumptuous layers held peril. Too soft, and one might sink so deep that air failed to circulate, leaving the sleeper in a hollow pocket of chill. The art of warmth was never about comfort alone. It was balance. You roll to one side, and the faint scent of straw rises through the bedding, dry, dusty, and sweet, tinged with smoke from the hearth. It's the smell of stored summers. Somewhere in that scent lies the memory of fields golden under sun, of scythes flashing, of children laughing, as they gather what will later keep them alive through winter. Straw is both bedding and time capsule, preserving a season of warmth within each brittle stem. The featherbed above it shifts differently, almost alive beneath you. You can hear the faint whisper of feathers sliding against one another, a sound like distant wings. For centuries, those feathers symbolized privilege. They were carefully plucked, cleaned, sorted by hand. A single bed could require tens of thousands. Each one carried its own history: a bird that once flew, a meal once eaten, a life repurposed for comfort. To sleep on feathers was to rest upon a small kingdom of ghosts. But even luxury had limits. In the coldest months, condensation from breath and body seeped downward, dampening the lower layers. Feathers clumped, straw soared, and the smell of rot sometimes rose from beneath the sheets. Servants turned mattresses weekly, beating them with sticks to shake out the dust and moisture. It was hard work, a chore that blurred the line between cleanliness and devotion. A well-tended bed was a mark of civilization amid the barbarity of the weather. You press your hand downward, feeling the unevenness beneath. It's not the smooth, springy mattress of your modern world, but a living surface that changes with every movement. The medieval sleeper accepted that, perhaps even found comfort in it. To them, the bed was not a static thing, but a dialogue between earth and body. It shifted, breathed, whispered back when you moved. In the servants' quarters, beds were little more than sacks of straw on wooden planks. Sometimes, entire families shared one large pallet, limbs tangled, bodies pressed together under a single wool blanket. They slept like animals in a nest, a tangle of warmth and trust. Their straw was replaced rarely, their nights short, their dreams shallow. Yet, many chroniclers noted they were often warmer than their lords. The air near the kitchen, the proximity to livestock, and the sheer closeness of bodies created a living furnace no feather bed could rival. Up here, in the Lord's chamber, your comfort is quieter, lonelier. The feathers sigh softly beneath you, but their warmth feels borrowed, precarious. The room's chill licks at the edges of the bed, creeping inward through every stitch. You pull the furs higher, listening to the faint rustle below, the mingling of straw and feather of the world above and below. Together, they form the fragile architecture of medieval rest. There's poetry in their partnership. Straw holds the memory of the earth, feather the memory of the sky. One anchors, one uplifts. Between them lies the human body, trying to survive the night, not quite bird, not quite beast, but something in between, dreaming of warmth. You shift again, and the bed murmurs its reply, a soft creak, a whisper of stalks, a flutter of feathers. The sound is strangely comforting. It tells you that you are not alone, that others before you have heard this same symphony of sleep, that thousands of nights have passed with the same rustle beneath the same stone ceilings. Soon, the sounds blur into rhythm, the gentle crackle of the hearth, the breathing of the castle, the heartbeat of straw and feather beneath your back. The fortress of fabric above holds the air still, trapping the warmth you've made. And for the first time tonight, the cold seems to hesitate at the edge of your world. In the great scheme of survival, straw and feather were small miracles, proof that even in a place built for war, humans found ways to make softness, to build comfort out of what the land and sky provided. You close your eyes, sinking deeper into the shifting layers. The feathers sigh once more, and the straw answers with a soft, ancient rustle, the lullaby of a world learning, slowly, to sleep through its own cold. Long before the first body slipped under the blankets, before the last candle was snuffed out, there was a ceremony, small, glowing, and perilous. It began with a hiss, the faint crackle of coals in a shallow metal pan. This was the nightly act of defiance known across medieval Europe, the warming of the bed, a ritual as necessary as prayer, as dangerous as fire itself. You can almost see it, the servant entering quietly, head bowed, carrying the long, handled pan in both hands like a sacred relic. Its brass lid gleams dully, spotted with soot, and from the tiny holes cut into its surface escapes a breath of orange light. Inside, live embers shift and sigh, whispering smoke. The servant moves carefully, one wrong tilt, one spark on the rushes, and warmth turns to ruin. Yet this was the price of comfort in a world without heat, a nightly gamble played in every castle, every manor, every shivering chamber. The bed waits, massive, curtained, and cold enough to bite. The servant lifts the mattress edge, slides the warming pan beneath, and begins to move it in slow, circular strokes. You can hear the faint rasp of metal against linen, the gentle rattle of coals inside. The motion must be constant, too still, and the heat scorches the sheets, too quick, and it vanishes before doing its work. It is a dance of precision learned by repetition and fear. A faint aroma fills the air, iron, ash, the ghost of wood smoke. The fabric breathes it in. The heat spreads unevenly, blooming in patches beneath the linen, like ghostly hands. You can imagine the warmth radiating upward, softening the chill, coaxing life back into the bed's dead fabric. For a few moments, the space smells almost alive, the scent of hearth and home invading the cold geometry of stone. When the servant finishes, the embers are extinguished outside the door, the pan set aside for morning cleaning. But the warmth lingers, trapped beneath the blankets like a secret. The master or mistress will feel it later, that brief miracle when cold sheets meet skin and, for a moment, surrender. The warming pan was more than convenience. It was necessity. In castles where frost crept across walls and breath froze midair, beds without it were cruel punishments. Historical records speak of maids who carried these pans from room to room, their arms reddened by heat, their lungs filled with smoke. Some were scolded for scorching the linens, others praised for their careful hands. To handle fire was to hold both life and danger at once, a quiet power entrusted to the lowest ranks of service. You can imagine the quiet pride of the task. A good servant left no scorch marks, no ash, no lingering odor of burnt cloth. They left only the faintest ghost of warmth, a hidden kindness, gone before it could be seen. In the silence of the medieval night, this was how care was expressed, not through words, but through the temperature of a bed. Yet the warming pan also carried darker tales. There were accidents, fires started by forgotten embers, curtains consumed in minutes, families roused by screams. Chroniclers record such nights with grim fascination. The same tool that gave comfort could devour whole chambers when mishandled. It was a delicate balance, the line between life and flame. In the servants' quarters, there were no such luxuries. The poor warmed their straw pallets by laying heated stones wrapped in cloth, or by filling small pottery jars with embers from the kitchen hearth. These makeshift heaters cracked easily, sometimes bursting in the night, scattering sparks across the rushes. Yet even those who knew the risk rarely went without. Cold made them reckless, and hope, like fire, demanded feeding. In the Lord's chambers, the ritual became art. The warming pan was polished daily, its handle carved with initials, its lid pierced in patterns of leaves or stars. Some were made of copper, others of silver, ornate enough to be passed down as heirlooms. Yet despite the luxury, the danger never lessened. Servants kept buckets of sand nearby, ready for the worst. The castle's stones saved many lives, its wooden rafters claimed many more. You lie beneath your own fortress of fabric now, and the memory of that ritual clings faintly to the air. Perhaps your bed was warmed earlier. You can feel a subtle difference in the sheets, a softness that wasn't there before. The scent of iron lingers, faint but real. You close your eyes and imagine the servant's hands, the glow of the coals, the quiet devotion of the act. There's something intimate about it, almost spiritual. The fire that cooked food by day now blesses the bed by night, bridging the two halves of survival. The room creaks as the last embers in the hearth fade. Your skin still carries the echo of heat, left behind by the pan, a thin memory of warmth pressed into the fabric. In an hour it will be gone, devoured by the cold. But for now it is enough. You pull the furs closer, grateful for a fire you never saw. In the end, the warming pan was not just a tool. It was a symbol of the medieval struggle itself. Every night, people tamed a fragment of fire, coaxed it into their beds, and dared to sleep beside it. They lived in a world where warmth could burn and cold could kill, and yet they found a way to balance between the two. That balance was their genius and their faith. As you drift toward sleep, you imagine the glowing circle of metal sliding beneath another mattress in another century, carrying its ember, heart from one bed to the next. The fire changes hands, time passes, but the ritual endures. The act remains what it always was, a small, perilous miracle, performed in the name of warmth. Even wrapped in furs, you soon learn the truth every medieval sleeper knew. No number of blankets could keep out the cold forever. The warmth trapped beneath your covers leaks away with every shift, every sigh. That's why the people of the Middle Ages dressed for sleep, as if preparing for battle. The night was not a time for rest. It was an adversary, and one faced best in armor made of cloth. You pull at your collar and feel the rough weave of the linen nightshirt against your skin. It's long, falling past the knees, with sleeves that close tight at the wrists to keep warmth from escaping. This simple garment was universal. The noble and the poor alike wore versions of it, though the materials changed. For the rich, the fabric might be fine Flemish linen or soft wool dyed pale with herbs. For peasants, coarse homespun, heavy and itchy, but dependable. Over the shirt, you might wear a woolen tunic or robe, belted loosely at the waist. Thick socks or wool wrappings encase your feet. On your head, a cap tied beneath the chin. Men wore caps shaped like hoods. Women wrapped their hair in linen coifs. The most cautious even slept with gloves, their fingers hidden like treasures. To modern eyes, it would look absurd, a figure bundled head to toe, cocooned in fabric beneath mountains of bedding. But to the medieval heart, it was prudence, not absurdity. Keep the head warm, and the heart will follow, they used to say. Physicians of the age believed that cold entered through the crown, that sleep itself could be broken by a chill at the scalp. The nightcap was more than comfort. It was protection of the soul. Chroniclers describe kings and commoners alike slipping into bed in full attire, the only visible flesh a red nose and the faint glow of breath in the dark. You run a hand across your arm and feel the texture of layered wool. The friction hums softly, creating a spark of warmth. The principle was the same for everyone: trap air, not just fabric. Air warmed by the body became the final shield, an invisible lining between man and frost. Clothes weren't just worn, they were engineered, arranged with purpose. Linen first, then wool, sometimes even fur-lined garments if one could afford them. In monasteries, the night clothes were symbols of discipline. Monks slept in their habits, bound by vows forbidding the luxury of naked rest. They lay fully clothed on thin pallets, their hoods drawn low, the fabric rough against their shaven heads. To suffer the cold, they believed, was to honor God, a reminder that warmth was a temptation of the flesh. Many froze through long vigils in stone cells, whispering prayers as their breath turned to frost in the air. Yet their devotion held. In a sense, they clothed not only their bodies, but their faith. For nobles, however, the act of dressing for sleep had its own kind of ritual. Servants laid out garments by the fire before their lords retired, so that every layer was pre-warmed. Some households even kept special bedrobes lined with fur or padded with feathers, worn only between chamber and bed. Ladies wrapped themselves in long wool gowns, their sleeves trailing like shadows. Men favored thick robes fastened with leather cords. The flicker of firelight turned the room into a slow, moving ballad of cloth, layers being tied, adjusted, draped, and finally surrendered to the bed. There was poetry in those motions. Dressing for the night was not unlike donning armor at dawn, deliberate, ritualized, filled with meaning. The same care given to preparing for battle was given to preparing for sleep. In both, the body faced an enemy, and in both, survival depended on readiness. You lift your blanket and catch the faint scent of lanolin, that musky, oily trace that clings to wool. It's earthy comforting, a reminder that warmth comes from life itself. In this scent is the sheep from which the cloth was shorn, the shepherd who tended it, the weaver who spun it. Every thread carries the ghost of effort, the memory of hands. When you lie beneath these layers, you are clothed not just in fabric, but in labor. The cold persists, pressing against every seam. You can feel it testing you, searching for weakness, the exposed wrist, the gap between sleeve and glove, the edge of your cap, where hair meets skin. You pull everything tighter, sealing yourself within. The air you breathe grows warmer. The linen against your neck dampens with condensation. Gradually, The sensation of freezing recedes into a dull awareness, the body's truce with the night. You think of the many others dressing like this in distant chambers, peasants huddled in cottages nights, in drafty keeps, widows in silent rooms. Each layer they pull on is a declaration of life. No one ever slept naked in a castle. Nakedness was for birth, for sin, or for death, never for night. To be clothed was to be armed. A candle guttering on the bedside table flares once, throwing shadows across the canopy. The room seems to shrink, its edges softened by darkness. The wind outside wails, but its voice feels distant now. You reach up, touch the edge of your cap, and pull it lower over your ears. The gesture is small, automatic, the kind countless hands have made before yours. Wrapped in your layers, you no longer feel fragile. You feel prepared. The night may be vast, but so are you, layered, armored, enduring. Every thread you wear is part of an unbroken tradition, one that stretches from peasant huts to royal chambers, from abbey cells to the cold beds of history. To clothe the night is to declare, I will not yield. The wind rattles the shutters once more, but you are warm now, if only just. Beneath the weight of linen, wool, and willpower, the cold must wait outside a little longer. It has always waited, and somehow, through all the centuries, humanity has always made it wait. You shift beneath the furs and hear not only your own breath, but others. In the dark, it is impossible to tell how many bodies share the space, 2, 3, perhaps more. But the warmth tells the truth. This is not solitude, it is survival by proximity. In a world where the cold could kill, companionship was more than comfort. It was heat. The medieval bed was rarely a private place. Paintings and records may show lords reclining alone in silken sheets, but reality was far less romantic. Even nobles shared their beds with spouses, children, guests, servants, or favored hounds. The peasantry did the same, packed close beneath coarse blankets, limbs tangled in the common pursuit of warmth. The human body, they knew, was the best furnace ever built. You listened to the quiet rhythm of breathing around you, uneven, overlapping. Someone shifts, the straw rustles, a faint sigh escapes into the air. Beneath the heavy canopy, the warmth of bodies collects, thick and human. The cold still lingers at the edges, but at the center of the bed, it begins to retreat. Heat gathers invisibly, rising like the breath of a sleeping beast. In cottages, this closeness was born of necessity. Families slept in a single room, parents and children bundled together, sometimes with livestock in the adjoining space to add warmth. 3-dog night, the old saying goes, a night so cold you needed 3 dogs beside you to live till morning. It wasn't a metaphor. The body heat of animals could mean survival, their steady respiration a lullaby against the howling wind outside. Up in the castle, things were no different, only better dressed. Great lords and ladies shared their beds with attendants or guests, not from affection, but from prudence. In vast stone chambers, a single body's warmth vanished in minutes. 2 or 3 could create a small sanctuary. Medieval etiquette manuals even advised hosts to offer a shared bed as a courtesy, a gesture both practical and social. In some records, travelers thanked their hosts not for the meal or the hospitality, but for a warm bed well shared. The bed itself reflected this habit. The feather mattress was wide, sometimes large enough for 5 people. Curtains enclosed them all, transforming the shared space into a private world. Conversation dwindled as the night deepened. Words gave way to breathing, to the small noises of bodies adjusting, to the muffled cough of someone in the dark. There was no shame in it. Sleep was communal, and privacy was a luxury no one could afford. You turned slightly, feeling another person's warmth at your back. The contact is startling but strangely reassuring. It is a reminder that you are not alone against the cold, that someone else's body, imperfect and mortal as yours, stands between you and the void. There is something profoundly human in that recognition. For all the divisions of rank and faith, warmth erased hierarchy. The lord and the servant, the mother and the child, the sinner, and the saint all breathed the same mist into the frozen air. In monasteries, the rule of silence extended even to sleep. Monks lay shoulder to shoulder in long dormitories, each separated by a narrow board or curtain. Their breaths mingled in the darkness, a chorus of devotion and endurance. They were not allowed fires in their sleeping quarters. Their only heat came from one another. Chroniclers tell of winter mornings when the brothers woke to find frost coating their robes and the outlines of their faces pressed into the straw like masks. Still, they gave thanks for the shared warmth of the living. Among the peasantry, shared beds were louder affairs, filled with whispers, snores, and the occasional elbow. Children nestled against their parents, babies between bodies to stay alive through the night. Stories were told until sleep overtook them all, tales of saints and spirits, of summer's return, of the promise that the cold would pass. In those moments, warmth was not just physical but emotional, born of closeness, laughter, and trust. You think of the dogs now, curled at the foot of the bed, their first smells of earth and smoke. They twitch in dreams, paws flicking as if chasing something unseen. When one shifts closer, pressing its flank against your feet, you feel the radiant heat it gives off, steady, loyal, uncomplaining. No wonder medieval people loved their animals so fiercely. They were companions not only in life, but in the nightly struggle for warmth. The air inside the curtains grows thicker, laced with breath and scent, wool, skin, and the faint musk of fur. To modern sensibilities, it might seem suffocating. To those who lived it, it was safety made tangible. The world beyond the bed was silent and deadly, but inside this cluster of bodies, life thrived. You close your eyes, listening again. The breathing sinks unconsciously, falling into a rhythm that mirrors the fire's last crackles in the hearth. A deep exhale here, a sigh there, all blending into one slow, human heartbeat. You realize that this, more than the stone walls, the furs, or the warming pan, was the castle's true defense against the cold, togetherness. Some historians call it necessity, others resilience. But perhaps it was something greater, a kind of faith, a belief that warmth, like hope, multiplies when shared, that the cold can be endured so long as another pulse beats close by. You shift closer to the body beside you. Their breath brushes your cheek, their warmth seeps into your spine. The furs rustle. The wind claws at the shutters, but the cold no longer wins. Beneath the canopy, a small, imperfect miracle holds. For the rest of the night, no one moves far. There's comfort in the weight of another against you, in the soft murmur of sleep. And when morning comes, when frost glitters on the walls and the fire is long dead, the only proof of life will be this, a tangle of bodies and blankets, steaming faintly with shared breath, having survived the night together. The wind claws at the shutters of your chamber, but beneath the furs, you are warm, barely. The fire has dwindled to embers, and each breath leaves a small ghost above your lips. Yet somewhere beyond these castle walls, in a low, roofed cottage half, buried under snow, another family sleeps soundly. No feather beds, no warming pans. Just a hearth, a heap of straw, and the hum of life pressed close together. And somehow they are warmer than you. That is the quiet irony of the Middle Ages. The poor, for all their hunger, often slept in greater warmth than the rich. Comfort, it seems, did not always follow wealth. You imagine the peasant cottage now, a squat shape against the frost, its thatched roof bowed with snow. Smoke seeps through the rafters instead of up a proper chimney, filling the single room with a haze that stings the eyes but softens the air. The walls, made of wattle and daub, breathe faintly with the heat of the hearth fire that never fully dies. The floor is packed earth, the same color as the smoke, the same smell as the world outside. Inside, life gathers tightly. A single fire glows in the center, ringed by stones blackened from 100 winters. The warmth spreads unevenly but persistently, a pulse that holds the room at a steady, bearable chill. Around it, straw is scattered thick, not decoration, but insulation. Children lie there in bundles, wrapped in rough blankets or old cloaks. A dog curls at their feet. The parents sleep on the far side, nearer the warmth, but within reach of every small body. It isn't luxury, but it is balance. The low ceiling traps heat. The smoke acts like a crude insulation layer, and the sheer press of life creates a climate all its own. The air may be foul, but it is warm. And in a world where cold could cripple, foul air was the lesser evil. Back in the castle, you have walls of stone, ceilings high as trees, air so clean it hurts to breathe, and yet you shiver. The fire's warmth rises uselessly into space. The vastness of the room defeats it. You realize that the architecture of power was never meant for comfort. These halls were made to impress, not to protect. To live here was to rule, not to rest. In the cottage, everything serves the opposite purpose. The space is small, every object earning its keep. Beds are built into the walls, wooden alcoves lined with straw and shared by the family. The fire doubles as kitchen and heater. Its coals glow long into the night. Smoke drifts upward, coating the beams with soot that hardens and seals them against the wind. Even the livestock, penned in a corner or beneath the same roof, lend their breath to the shared warmth. The smell is thick but familiar: hay, wool, earth, and life. Historians once dismissed these homes as primitive, but recent discoveries tell another story. They were marvels of adaptation. The peasants didn't fight the cold, they lived with it, tamed it through closeness, simplicity, and rhythm. Their nights were short but survivable, their mornings filled with the crackle of the rekindled hearth and the bleating of animals shaking frost from their backs. You picture them waking now, a mother stirring the ashes to coax a new flame, a child rubbing sleep from smoke, stung eyes, a man stepping outside to fetch water already frozen in the bucket. Their faces are red, their hands raw, but they are alive, not numbed by the stone chill that grips your castle chamber, but vital in a way that comes only from contact with fire and flesh. In the nobility's world, warmth is borrowed from servants, from furs, from devices like the warming pan. In the peasant's world, warmth is earned, exchanged, shared. It is the byproduct of labor, the reward of proximity. When the family huddles together at night, their heat builds naturally, a collective defiance of the cold. They may wake stiff and smoky, but they wake smiling. You think of the irony again. The castle rises as a monument to wealth, yet it stands colder than the humblest hut. The poor sleep in the glow of their fire. The rich must summon servants to manufacture warmth. One world smolders, the other freezes with dignity. The difference, perhaps, lies in scale. The peasant's hearth and body occupy the same small volume of air. They inhabit the same breath. Heat has nowhere to flee. In the castle, heat escapes upward, swallowed by empty space and ambition. The same walls that protect against armies betray their owners to winter. And yet, neither world is free from hardship. In the peasant cottage, the smoke can suffocate, the damp can rot lungs, and vermin share the bed as freely as family. Warmth comes at the price of cleanliness, but warmth nonetheless. And in that warmth, a kind of joy survives. Laughter, whispered stories, the sleepy murmur of a child against a mother's shoulder. Life in its rawest form, pressed close to the fire. You turn in your own bed, imagining that room miles away, that fire flickering on brown faces smudged with soot. You realize that the poorest of them, wrapped in patched wool and rough straw, might be sleeping more peacefully than you, their world smaller, but somehow more human. There's an old proverb from the 14th century, better to be warm in rags than frozen in silk. You understand it now. Warmth is not luxury, it's intimacy. The peasants had less of everything, except the one thing that mattered most on nights like this: each other. The wind rattles the shutters again, and for a moment, you almost envy them, their small room, their shared breath, their rough simplicity that no wealth can replicate. You lie back, pull the fur tighter around your shoulders, and listen to the echo of their distant laughter in your mind. Somewhere in that sound, that mingling of smoke, straw, and song, you find what all the castles of Europe never managed to hold: warmth that belongs to no one, yet keeps everyone alive. If the castle represents pride and the peasant cottage necessity, then the monastery stands for something different: discipline. In those stone sanctuaries, warmth was not a comfort to be pursued, but a temptation to resist. The monks of medieval Europe, men who had renounced the world, also renounced its fires. And so, in dormitories built to honor humility, they met the cold each night as both an adversary and a teacher. You step into the dormitory in your mind, guided by a single candle. The flame trembles, reflecting on rows of narrow beds carved into wood or stone. There are no curtains here, no feather beds or warming pans, only pallets lined with straw, each covered by a rough woolen blanket. The air feels thinner than anywhere else in the world, clean, ascetic, merciless. The monks move silently. Their robes, the same coarse habits they wear by day, rustle softly as they cross the floor. They do not speak. They do not look up. The rule of St. Benedict forbids speech after nightfall. The only sounds allowed are prayer and breath. They kneel by their beds, hands clasped, lips moving in whispers you can't hear. A moment later, as if commanded by an unseen bell, they lie down, dozens of bodies moving as one, an army surrendering to cold and faith. The beds are close but separate. Thin partitions of wood or hanging cloth divide one sleeper from the next. There is no privacy, but there is order, each man confined to his space like a note in a sacred chord. The room itself is vast, yet the silence makes it smaller, intimate. The candle gutters once, twice, then dies. Darkness folds in, absolute. You can almost feel what they feel. The coarse wool scratches against their skin, the straw beneath them pricks through thin bedding. They tuck their hands into their sleeves, pull their cowls low over their heads, and breathe through their noses to conserve warmth. The air smells faintly of hay wax and cold stone. Their breath forms pale clouds that vanish into the night. In winter, frost often coated the inside of the dormitory walls. Chronicles speak of monks waking with their blankets stiff as boards, the edges of their robes frozen to the straw. Some fell ill, others endured. A few, according to legend, died peacefully in their sleep, martyrs not to war, but to weather. Yet the survivors saw no tragedy in it. To suffer the cold was to purify the flesh, to share in Christ's endurance. In a sense, the frost itself was prayer. Monastic architecture reflected this devotion to austerity. The dormitories were often built above the cloister, long and narrow, their windows small and unglazed. At one end stood the staircase leading directly to the chapel. When the bells rang for matins, sometimes at 2 a.m, the monks rose instantly, barefoot or in thin sandals, and filed down to prayer. Their bodies ached from chill, but their discipline burned brighter than any hearth. There was method in this severity. The cold kept them vigilant. It dulled appetite, sharpened thought, reminded them of mortality. In a strange way, the absence of warmth created another kind of heat, the fire of purpose. Some chroniclers even wrote that the cold made prayer sweeter, that a body tested by hardship gave the soul clarity. Yet humanity found its way into even these austere rituals. On the coldest nights, the older monks would quietly walk the rows after compline, adjusting blankets, tucking them tighter around the youngest brothers. No words were spoken, but the gesture was its own kind of benediction, warmth offered not from fire, but from compassion. Sometimes a single candle was left burning near the door, its small light a symbol of endurance, one flame against 1,000 shadows. You imagine lying among them now, your body stiff beneath the weight of rough wool. The silence presses like a physical thing. You can hear the wind outside, clawing at the high windows. Every sound becomes magnified, the creak of timber, the sigh of straw, the slow rhythm of collective breath. Sleep comes not as comfort, but as surrender, and yet there is peace in it. The cold strips away everything unnecessary. There are no possessions here, no luxuries to protect. Only the body, the soul, and the will to persist. The monks' endurance, their nightly acceptance of discomfort, becomes a meditation on the fragility of warmth itself. To them, fire was not merely dangerous, it was indulgence. Better, perhaps, to let the flesh learn humility from the frost. Still, even monasteries had their small mercies. Some abbeys allowed braziers in the refectory or infirmary, places where the elderly or ill could thaw their bones. On rare feast nights, a fire might be lit in the dormitory itself, the monks gathering silently around it, faces softening in the glow. No songs, no chatter, only the crackle of flame and the shared knowledge of its fleeting grace. When it died, no one complained. They returned to their beds with hearts somehow warmer for having remembered what warmth felt like. You breathe out, and for a moment your imagination merges with there's dozens of bodies wrapped in faith instead of furs, held together not by heat, but by purpose. In the deep silence of the monastic night, the lesson becomes clear: warmth can be borrowed, but peace must be earned. When the bells finally toll, their sound shatters the darkness like light through glass. The monks rise, their breaths white in the air. They bow their heads, form a line, and vanish toward the chapel, leaving behind only the faint imprint of their bodies in the straw. The dormitory remains still, cold, waiting. And in that stillness, something lingers, not fire, not warmth, but endurance, the quiet heat of faith refusing to die. By now, the castle feels like a living creature, one that inhales cold and exhales smoke. The air you breathe is thick with it, the scent of oak and peat, of tallow candles and charred rushes. It clings to everything: your clothes, your hair, your skin. Smoke is the castle's second atmosphere, its silent companion. It both saves and suffocates, a paradox as constant as the frost. You stir beneath the blankets and cough softly. Even here, in the Lord's chamber, the air carries a faint haze from the hearth below. In a medieval world without chimneys as we know them, smoke traveled its own mysterious routes, curling through vents, slipping through gaps in the roof beams, weaving around the rafters before wandering out through slits in the stone. It never truly left, it only settled, waiting. For peasants, that smoke was a gift. In cottages with central fires and no flues, it hung low and thick, filling the room like fog. Children grew up with stinging eyes and sooty lungs, but they also grew up warm. The smoke trapped heat close to the ground, sealing in every ounce of comfort. It coated the thatch above with pitch, hardening it against rain and wind. It cured meat hung from rafters, smoked out insects and damp, and in its own rough way, preserved life. In the castle, smoke was more refined, but no less omnipresent. Large hearths drew better, but drafts carried their breath everywhere. The great halls were never entirely clear. A faint bluish veil lingered near the ceiling, ghost-like in torchlight. The scent of burned oak and resin seeped into the tapestries, the beds, even the hair of those who slept near the fire. Guests who arrived from outside could always tell who lived within. They smelled of warmth, of survival. You shift again, and the faint taste of ash touches your tongue. It's oddly comforting. Fire may vanish, but its ghost remains. Smoke is memory made visible, the afterimage of heat. Every medieval sleeper knew this intimately. They breathed in warmth that had died hours ago, and in that act, they kept a part of it alive. There was danger, of course. The same smoke that comforted could also kill. Chroniclers tell of peasants who died in their sleep when a gust pushed the fire's breath back into the room. Infants suffocated in cradles near the hearth. Servants woke gasping in smoky chambers, their lungs heavy with soot. And yet, no one gave up the fire. Its gifts outweighed its wrath. The monks wrote about it with both awe and disdain. One Cistercian scribe described smoke as the visible spirit of sin. It rose toward heaven, yet left behind filth. Another called it a reminder that warmth costs purity. Still, even they built their refectories with wide hearths, their dormitories above them, trusting that the rising warmth would soften the stone. They endured the smoke as they endured the cold, without complaint, as part of the divine design. You imagine what the castle must look like from outside. It's well past midnight. The wind roars over the battlements, and from the tower roofs drift thin trails of smoke, illuminated faintly by the moon. Each is a thread of life, a signal that within those walls, someone still breathes, still resists the cold. A traveler on the road below might look up and see those plumes as proof that the world hasn't frozen over completely. Inside, the effect is humbler. The smoke blurs the edges of things, the rafters, the bed curtains, even your own hands when you raise them toward the light. It softens the hard geometry of stone, wrapping it in a gauze of impermanence. The castle, for all its might, feels fragile under that veil. Everything human does. You remember reading that medieval builders didn't fear smoke. They designed for it. Rooms were built with vents high in the walls, their openings carved into animal faces or floral patterns. The smoke that escaped through those mouths was thought to carry evil spirits with it. What lingered inside, however, was accepted as protection, a charm against decay and disease. There was even a saying among servants, "A smoky hall is a healthy hall." You breathe deeper, feeling the warmth of your own exhalation mingle with the invisible haze. For a moment, the boundary between fire and flesh blurs. Your breath steams into the air like miniature smoke, your body another hearth. Every inhale is a reclaiming of the room's warmth, every exhale a surrender. You are part of the same ancient cycle that filled these chambers for centuries, the ceaseless exchange of heat and air between body and flame. The smell of smoke is more than sensory, it's emotional. It speaks of long nights survived, of dinners eaten by flickering firelight, of stories told when the world outside was ice. It is the scent of endurance. Generations inhaled it, coughed it out, and carried on. You turn toward the hearth, watching the last embers shift beneath the ash. A thin wisp of smoke rises from the logs, faint, uncertain, but alive. It curls upward, finding its way to the rafters before dissolving. It looks almost like breath, tired, persistent, beautiful in its futility. The castle exhales again. The cold rushes in to fill the void the smoke leaves behind. But as long as the smell remains, you know warmth existed here, if only for a moment. In the morning, when frost grips the window and your clothes smell faintly of wood and ash, that scent will remind you of tonight, of fire fought and nearly lost, of life persisting in vapor. The people of the Middle Ages lived in smoke the way fish live in water. It filled their lungs, their walls, their stories. It was both enemy and friend, both curse and salvation. They could not escape it, and they did not want to. For in every breath of smoke, there was proof of what mattered most, that something had burned, and someone had lived to see it. The fire has long gone cold, and what light remains comes from the moon, a pale, milky glow filtering through the narrow windows of your chamber. You turn toward them, half expecting to see stars. But there are none. The openings are white, clouded over, sealed with frost so thick it gleams like marble. The castle's windows have turned to mirrors of winter itself. In the modern mind, a window means sunlight, warmth, a connection to the world beyond. In the medieval castle, it meant the opposite, an open wound through which the night could strike. Glass was rare, fragile, and precious. Most windows were simple slits or holes covered by oiled linen, stretched parchment, or thin slices of horn. These crude coverings admitted light, but not clarity. They blurred the world outside into shifting silhouettes, a torch's flicker, the outline of trees, the faint suggestion of snow falling against the horizon. You draw closer and feel the cold radiating from the stone frame. The air near the window is several degrees colder than the rest of the room. Frost creeps along the inner sill, glittering like a line of tiny daggers. You lift the curtain and touch the surface. It burns your fingertips with the same intensity as fire. The cold here isn't mere absence. It has weight, presence, intent. Medieval builders understood this. That's why windows in castles were small, narrow, and deeply recessed. They served the wall, not the inhabitant, designed for defense, not comfort. The slit you look through now might once have been an arrow loop, widened centuries later into a semblance of civility. But even softened, it remains a conduit for the outside. When the wind hits it right, the covering trembles, and a faint whistle cuts through the silence, like a blade drawn from a sheath. You imagine the morning after a storm. The covering stiff with frost, the rushes below them soaked with meltwater. Servants rise early to scrape ice from the frames, to wring out the fabric, to light fires that struggle to chase the chill away. They stuff cracks with moss, cloth, or waxed wool. Some even hang spare cloaks over the openings, turning light into shadow, but regaining a fragment of warmth. The rich, of course, had options, though not many. By the 13th century, some manors imported glass panes from France or Venice, translucent and uneven, tinted in greens or ambers. These were treasures, small luxuries set into lead frames, thick as bottle bottoms. But even they couldn't keep out the cold. They merely changed its texture, turning the wind into a whisper instead of a shout. When touched, they were still icy, and in the deepest winter, frost traced lacework across their inner surface, delicate and cruelly beautiful. You think of how people must have seen the world through such barriers. The outside was always distant, ghostly, a blur of movement and color behind misted coverings. To wake to that view was to live half inside a dream, and perhaps that dream was protection of its own kind. The sharpness of reality, the storms, the snow, the endless gray, was softened by the blur, turned into something survivable. Some castles had shutters, thick wooden boards that could be barred shut from the inside. They kept out the wind, but also the light, turning the chamber into a cave. You can almost hear the ritual of closing them for the night, the creak of hinges, the thud of wood meeting stone, the faint clatter of the bar sliding into place. Once shut, the world outside ceased to exist. Only the sounds remained, the wind keening through the cracks, the groan of timbers, the faint rattle of frost forming anew. Historians sometimes write that medieval nights were darker than ours, not only because of the absence of electricity, but because of the deliberate shutting out of the world. Windows of ice did more than let in cold. They divided time itself. Once they were sealed, evening ceased to be a gradual dimming and became an act, a closing. The castle turned inward. Life retreated to the glow of a single flame, the warmth of shared breath. You peer closer. The frost on the window forms strange shapes, fern-like patterns, spirals, and fractals that seem to grow as you watch. Nature's handwriting, scrawled in silence. The air near the stone smells faintly metallic, sharp with cold. When you exhale, a thin patch of the frost melts, revealing a sliver of the world beyond, the courtyard below, empty and silver under the moonlight. Snow drifts against the walls. The world looks still enough to be dead. You pull back quickly, drawing the curtain shut. The difference in temperature is immediate. The air behind the fabric feels almost warm by comparison. The curtain itself, thick with woven wool, is another defense in this endless layering of survival. You run your hand down its length and realize how much of life in this place is spent fighting invisible forces, light, wind, air. Even beauty becomes a hazard. There are stories of windows cracking under sudden frost, the sound like a musket shot echoing through the keep, of birds found frozen on the sill, their wings outstretched mid-flight, of children pressing their faces to the coverings to watch the snow and leaving the imprint of their breath as tiny circles of life on a frozen wall. You return to your bed, feeling the weight of the curtains close around you again. Behind them, the frost reclaims its dominion. You can hear the faint ping of ice expanding in the window frame, a slow percussion marking the passage of another medieval night. The windows will not break, and neither will you. But both of you bear the same truth, that to survive here is to be both barrier and vessel. to hold the warmth inside while the world beyond freezes. You breathe deeply, the sound loud in the hush. The air you release fogs briefly before fading into the dark. You smile faintly. Your breath, at least, still leaves marks where light cannot. Silence in a castle is never complete. When the fires fade and the servants vanish into their corners, the stone begins to speak. It creaks, sighs, and whispers with 1,000 small sounds, the language of age and cold. But beneath those murmurs lies something more deliberate, the rhythm of the watch. The night belongs to those who do not sleep. You lie still, listening. At first, there is only the wind. It drags its fingers along the battlements, hissing through arrow slits, moaning down chimneys like a restless ghost. Then, faintly, you hear it, the slow echo of boots on stone. A guard is making his round. His steps sound distant, then close, then distant again, a heartbeat marking the castle's survival through the hours of darkness. Medieval castles were fortresses of vigilance. Even in peacetime, someone always kept watch. The cold was their enemy as much as any invading army. Guards stood on parapets where the wind never slept, wrapped in cloaks stiff with frost, their beards crusted with ice. They moved to stay alive, not just awake. The rhythm of their footsteps was both duty and self-preservation. The castle around you breathes in sync with them. When the wind howls, the shutters rattle. Somewhere above, a door slams open and then shut. You imagine the sentry pausing, adjusting his grip on the torch, his breath streaming white into the dark. He looks down at the frozen courtyard, a blank field of silver, the well at its center sealed with ice. His world is reduced to two sensations, the weight of his spear and the endless hum of the wind. Below, another watchman passes through the lower halls. His lantern throws soft circles of light against the walls. You can hear the faint jingle of the iron keys at his belt, the rustle of straw underfoot. He stops, listens, and then moves on. Each sound is swallowed quickly, absorbed by the stone. Only the echo remains. Sometimes he pauses at the chapel. The door creaks as he opens it. Inside, the air is colder still, untouched by fire. The candles before the altar have long since guttered, leaving only the faint scent of wax and incense. He stands for a moment, head bowed, and whispers a prayer, not for the souls of the dead, but for his fingers, his feet, his strength to endure the long, frozen hours until dawn. The guards of the night watch lived a strange life, half warrior, half ghost. Their duty was not only to protect, but to exist, to bear witness while others slept. Chroniclers rarely wrote about them, yet their presence was constant, as dependable as the tolling of the hours. They heard everything the rest of the castle missed, the scurry of mice in the pantry, the groan of wood expanding in the cold, the distant cry of wolves beyond the walls. You listen harder, and the sounds multiply. The wind finds a new tone, low and hollow, playing through the narrow slits like a flute. Chains clink where a portcullis hangs. A door bangs softly in a far corridor, its hinges complaining. Somewhere a dog growls, then settles back into silence. The sounds are neither comforting nor frightening, they simply are. The voice of the night itself. Sleep for the guards was brief and scattered. They learned to close their eyes standing up, to steal warmth from a torch, to share stories that blurred the line between superstition and survival. One tale tells of a sentry who fell asleep on duty and awoke covered in frost, his armor fused to his clothes. Another of a watchman who claimed the wind carried voices, the whispers of long, dead masons trapped within the walls. You can imagine it. In the stillness, every sound becomes magnified until imagination and reality blend. The castle becomes alive, its architecture singing in minor chords. Each tower hums a different note, the west tower groaning like a cello, the east stair whistling in a high, mournful pitch. Together, they form a nocturne of endurance. Occasionally, the sound of a bell punctuates the air. Not the joyous peal of morning, but the slow toll marking another hour survived. The guards know its rhythm by heart. One ring for midnight, 2 for matins, 3 for lauds. The bell is both torment and solace, proof that time still moves, even when the night feels eternal. Inside your bed's canopy, you can sense their presence even without seeing them. Every echo of boots, every clang of metal, every sigh of the wind connects you to the men above. You are warm because they are cold. You sleep because they do not. Their vigil holds back not just invaders, but the darkness itself. Outside, one of them stops beneath your window. You hear the scrape of his spear against stone, the sound of him stamping his feet for warmth. He exhales sharply, muttering something you can't make out, a curse, perhaps, or a prayer. Then his steps move on. The rhythm fades into the wind again. For a moment, you think of what it must feel like to stand where he stands, the whole world reduced to moonlight and breath. Your body trembling but unbroken, your thoughts narrowed to the next step, the next turn, the next hour. There is a strange nobility in it, this quiet endurance that asks for no reward. The sounds of the night watch continue, footsteps, doors, wind, breath, weaving a tapestry of vigilance that fills the emptiness. You close your eyes and listen as the castle itself keeps time with them, alive in its cold, eternal pulse. When dawn finally comes, the watchmen will descend from the towers, their faces pale, their hands cracked from the frost. They will warm themselves by the new fires, silent and blinking in the sudden light. No one will thank them. No one ever does. But their sounds will linger in the walls, the invisible proof that the night, for one more cycle, was survived. And in that, they will have done what every soul in the castle strives to do, to hold the darkness at bay until morning. The bells toll again, soft but insistent, a slow sequence of notes rolling through the air like mist. It's dawn, though you wouldn't know it yet. The light that filters through the curtains is thin and colorless, more suggestion than illumination. The night is retreated, but it hasn't surrendered. You can taste it still, the metallic tang of frost clinging to the back of your throat. You rise slowly, the sheets cold as armor. The air bites at your skin the moment it's exposed. The first breath outside the bed feels almost liquid, heavy with ice. You inhale, and it stings. You exhale, and the air turns white, curling upward like smoke. For a moment, you stand perfectly still, listening to the faint crackle of ice forming and reforming on the window panes. The world outside remains locked in its silver silence. Every morning in a medieval castle began this way, with breath, frost, and the struggle to reawaken the fire. Before sunrise, servants slipped from their straw pallets in the outer chambers, their footsteps muffled on the rushes. They moved like ghosts, wrapped in cloaks, fingers already numb. Their task was simple but sacred, to bring the castle back to life. You hear them now, the soft thud of firewood, the whisper of flint striking steel. A single spark leaps into the dark, lands in the ashes of last night's hearth, and catches. For a moment, the world holds its breath. Then a flicker, a hiss, a bloom of orange. The smallest fire, reborn from yesterday's death. The servant leans close, blowing gently. The embers answer, glowing deeper, warmer. Soon the room brightens by degrees, first shadow, then amber, then gold. The smell of smoke returns, mingling with the sharp scent of cold stone. You feel it reach you slowly, like a distant tide, washing over your fingers, your face, your lungs. Medieval mornings were not gentle. Every object was cold, the cup, the basin, the clothes stiff from the night's chill. Water left in a pitcher froze into a cloudy slab. To wash one's face was an act of courage. Servants cracked the surface with a knife, dipped their hands, and gasped as if stabbed. Lords, if they were fortunate, had their water warmed, but even that warmth was fleeting, devoured by the air before it reached the skin. You picture a great hall awakening. The fires along the walls are coaxed back to life one by one, each hearth reclaiming its glow. Light glints on metal goblets, on helmets and candlesticks. The breath of the servants rises in clouds as they sweep away ashes and scatter new rushes on the floor. Dogs stretch near the hearth, tails thumping softly. Somewhere a rooster crows, muffled by snow. Breakfast, if one could call it that, was as much a defense as a meal. Hot all thick pottage, bread toasted on iron rods. Steam rises from the bowls, fogging the faces of those gathered close. Conversation is minimal. The body wakes slowly in winter. The tongue follows last. You wrap yourself in a robe and step toward the fire, feeling warmth return to your feet in waves. The light outside the window grows stronger now, though it carries no heat. The frost glows with the first touch of sun, spreading pale colors across the stone walls, white, silver, blue. The castle seems to hold its breath again, waiting for permission to live. For centuries, this ritual repeated itself, morning after morning. Fire, frost, breath. To awaken was to fight, to coax the body and the building back into motion. Even the strongest walls were helpless before winter. Every day was a reclamation of warmth, and every dawn a test of will. You remember reading that some chroniclers measured time not by clocks, but by the fire's behavior. When the frost melts from the glass, the hour is prime. When the smoke climbs straight, the air will stay clear. When the fire dies before lauds, the cold will last 3 days more. It was a world read through sensation, not numbers, through what the skin could feel and the breath could see. You lift your hand toward the fire. The heat feels almost human, tender in its persistence. Behind you, the windows begin to weep. Thin trails of condensation running down the glass as frost surrenders to warmth. Each drop that falls is a victory, small but absolute. Servants move through the hall, carrying new logs, tending to lamps, preparing the first meal. One pauses to rub his hands near the flames, eyes closed, face slack with gratitude. He stays just long enough to feel his fingers again before returning to work. His life, like the fire, exists in cycles, extinguished, reignited, enduring. You sit now, the fur cloak around your shoulders, steaming faintly where the frost has melted. The cup of ale in your hand warms slowly. Its surface reflects the fire, trembling gold. You take a sip and feel the liquid thaw you from the inside out. The taste is rough, smoky, but alive. The castle breathes again. The night watch descends from the walls, stamping their feet, faces ruddy from the cold. Kitchen boys laugh as they pass the hearth. Somewhere in the courtyard, a groom breaks the ice in the horses, trow with a hammer, the sound ringing like glass. The day begins not with sunlight, but with effort, with the will to restore what the night has stolen. You glance once more toward the window. Beyond it, the world is dazzling, every branch crusted with ice, every surface glittering as if the earth itself were made of silver. It is beautiful in a way that hurts. You realize, as the monks and peasants and nobles once did, that beauty and cold are siblings, each perfect, each merciless. You turn back to the fire. Its crackle sounds almost like laughter now, soft, human, triumphant. The frost will return tonight, as it always does. But for this moment, warmth reigns again. And in that fragile rain lies the entire story of medieval life, to kindle, to endure, to begin again. You wake fully only when you feel the drag of the blankets, their sheer weight pressing against your chest like the hand of the earth itself. The air beyond them is brittle and sharp, but beneath their layered heaviness lies something closer to safety. This is the warmth of burden, the comfort of gravity. Medieval sleepers knew it well. The bed is less a piece of furniture than a fortress. Beneath you lies a straw mattress stuffed into a linen tick, uneven and lumpy, but soft enough to cradle weary bones. Above you, an empire of coverings, linen sheets, woolen blankets, fur throws, perhaps even a quilt if fortune smiles. The layers multiply until movement becomes a negotiation. You cannot toss or turn easily. You sink into them like sediment into silt. The first layer, the linen sheet, lies cool and smooth against the skin. It is the only fabric that can be washed regularly, the barrier between body and blanket, between cleanliness and eternity. Next comes the wool, thick and coarse, dyed brown or gray, sometimes edged with embroidery, if the household can afford it. Then come the furs, fox, rabbit, marten, even bear in the homes of the wealthy. Each layer adds not only warmth, but weight, the physical reassurance that you are protected, pinned, cocooned, and hidden from the world's cold indifference. You try to shift, but the blankets resist. It takes effort to roll an inch, and in that effort lies their purpose. They don't merely trap heat, they hold you still. The medieval body, trained by labor and endurance, found rest not in softness but in stillness. To sleep was to surrender, and the blankets enforced that surrender. Servants spent much of their day maintaining these layers. Each morning, they lifted and aired the bedding by the fire, shaking out straw, combing fur, folding the sheets into order again. The smell of wool and smoke mingled with lavender or dried herbs, small luxuries meant to mask the musk of use. In grander houses, beds were layered with mathematical precision, 3 sheets, 4 blankets, 2 fur coverings. In poorer homes, perhaps one of each, patched and threadbare, but cherished all the same. The canopy above, that tent of fabric hanging from carved posts, trapped warmth like a roof within a roof. Curtains closed tight around the bed transformed it into a microclimate. Inside, the breath of 2 or 3 bodies could raise the temperature by several degrees. Outside, the room froze solid. The bed became a world apart, a country of warmth surrounded by endless winter. You lift one of the furs and run your fingers through it. It feels dense, alive with memory. Somewhere in that pelt still lingers the animal's heat, a ghost of vitality that refuses to vanish even after death. To sleep under fur is to borrow that ghost, to merge with the wilderness for a few hours of peace. It's easy to understand why the nobility prized such coverings, why kings and queens traveled with them wherever they went. Furs were not fashion, they were survival. But not all blankets were born of luxury. In monasteries, coarse wool was the standard, unadorned, unlined, a constant reminder that comfort was sin's ally. Peasants used what they could, old cloaks, patched sacks, woven reeds covered by animal skins. A family might share a single blanket, each body a living extension of the fabric. Warmth was communal, a texture that bound people together as tightly as love. The weight of these coverings carried meaning beyond mere heat. To be covered was to be cared for. In medieval rituals of hospitality, a guest's worth was marked not by the food offered, but by the bed prepared, by the thickness of the bedding, the texture of the linens, the care in their layering. To be given more than 2 blankets was a sign of trust. To sleep beneath 4 meant honor. There were superstitions, too. Some believed that too many layers could smother the breath, that warmth, when excessive, might tempt death itself. Physicians warned against overheating the humors, especially the head. Thus, many slept with their faces uncovered, noses red with cold, believing the chill preserved balance. You lift the edge of the topmost blanket and feel the cold rush in. It's immediate, the air like a blade against your skin. You drop it back down quickly. The sensation reminds you how fragile warmth truly is, how it exists only through effort, layering, and vigilance. Every night in a medieval bed was a small engineering feat, the precise balancing of fabric, body, and breath. There is a sound to these blankets, too. The muted creak of straw beneath, the faint whisper of wool rubbing against linen, the muffled sigh when you settle deeper. These are the lullabies of the Middle Ages, sounds of work turned into comfort. You can almost hear the echo of hands folding, tuck-in, smoothing, invisible gestures of care that prepared the bed long before you entered it. Somewhere in the castle, a servant finishes her rounds. She pauses outside your door, listening, making sure no voice calls for more blankets, no cough signals the chill has crept in. Then she descends the stair, her footsteps fading into the thick silence of stone. The warmth she's created will hold for a few hours yet, until the fire dies again. You close your eyes. The weight of the bedding presses into you, grounding you in a way that feels almost eternal. Beneath so many layers, the line between body and bed blurs. You are neither moving nor still, only resting, floating in the heavy, muffled warmth of the Middle Ages. Outside, the frost reclaims the windows, the wind howls its nightly sermon, and the world freezes anew. But here, beneath your blankets, you are untouched, a fragile ember buried deep within the fortress of fabric. And perhaps that was always the truth of medieval sleep, not comfort, but containment. To rest was to hide from the world's cold rage. To be heavy was to be safe. You drift downward, pulled by the blanket's gravity, hearing only your own breath, soft, slow, alive. Sleep, at last, takes you. But even here, deep beneath the fortress of blankets and fur, the cold lingers, shaping what you dream. In a medieval night, dreams were not private things. They were bridges, prophecies, messages from the divine or the damned. The world of sleep was as real as the waking one, and often more dangerous. You begin in warmth. The bed around you fades, and you stand in a vast hall of flickering light. Fire burns along the walls, but it gives no heat. The air smells of wax and iron, and from the shadows, figures move, monks, peasants, nobles, all wrapped in the same rough wool, faces turned toward an invisible horizon. They do not see you, but they murmur words you almost understand, a prayer, a warning. Their breath drifts upward like incense, vanishing into the dark. Medieval people feared and revered such visions. To dream in warmth was a blessing. To dream in cold was a visitation. Chroniclers wrote of sleepers who saw angels when frost rhymed the windows, of saints who received revelations in frozen cells, of peasants who claimed the Virgin's voice came to them while they shivered through winter nights. The line between fever and prophecy was thin, blurred by hunger and chill. You walk deeper into the hall. The floor beneath your feet shifts from stone to snow, the air tightening around you. Every sound is muffled, even your heartbeat. Ahead, the fire gutters, revealing a bed like your own, its curtains moving as if stirred by breath. You part them gently. Inside lies a shape, yourself asleep, layered in fur, your face pale and still. From your mouth rises a faint mist, your own spirit, drifting free for a while. In the medieval mind, the dreamer's soul truly left the body each night. It wandered through heavens and hells, through memories and omens, tethered only by the thread of breath. Sleep was a kind of death rehearsed daily, a risk willingly taken. Every prayer before bed was a negotiation, if I should die before I wake. Not poetry, but probability. You kneel beside your dreaming self and notice something strange, frost blooming across the fur like flowers, each petal delicate and perfect. You reach to touch one, and the entire room shatters into light, shards of cold brilliance falling like snow. You are outside now, barefoot in the courtyard, the castle towering above like a mountain of silver. The stars pulse in rhythm with your breath. Dreams in those days were filled with signs like this: stars that moved, frost that spoke, fire that sang. Every symbol carried meaning. To dream of warmth was to be promised love or favor. To dream of ice meant trial, purification, or loss. Scholars spent entire lifetimes cataloging these visions, crafting manuals that blended medicine with mysticism. If thou dream of water frozen, one medieval text warns, guard thy heart from betrayal, for coldness seeketh company. You exhale, and the frost beneath your feet melts slightly, revealing the stone of the courtyard below. You recognize it, the same place you glimpsed through your frozen window hours ago. But now it's alive. The watchman's footprints glow faintly. The smoke rising from the chimneys is pale blue. Everything that was silent in waking hums with sound, whispers chants, the creak of ropes, the flutter of wings. And above all, the wind has a voice. It speaks in the same language you heard in the hall, soft, circular, older than speech. It tells you that the cold is not your enemy, only your teacher. That warmth without struggle is meaningless. That every breath you take is a small fire, and every dream, a spark that refuses to die. You open your mouth to answer, but no words come. Instead, you breathe, and your breath rises like smoke, merging with the stars. In that moment, you understand what the medieval mind already knew. That to dream is to participate in creation, to keep the universe turning by imagining it alive. When you wake, the world has shifted subtly. The bed is real again, heavy and warm. The furs smell faintly of smoke. The window glows pale with dawn. For a second, you almost believe the dream has followed you, that the frost still flowers on the fabric, that the whispers still move through the stone. Then, like all miracles, it fades. Medieval people often recorded such sensations in their morning prayers. "I have seen the cold made holy," one monk wrote in his journal, "and I have felt my own breath return as proof of mercy." Another, less devout, put it more plainly, "I woke and found myself alive. I thank the fire." You smile faintly at the thought. Dreams may have been divine, but waking was the true gift. The first movement of fingers, the first stretch of limbs beneath blankets that still hold the memory of your body, that was resurrection in its purest form. You sit up slowly, pushing aside the furs. The air greets you like an old adversary, sharp and honest. You shiver once, then laugh quietly. The dream lingers, its warmth more lasting than the fire. In the silence that follows, you realize something profound. Perhaps the people of those cold centuries didn't dream despite the chill. Perhaps they dreamed because of it. The cold stripped everything away until only imagination could fill the void. And from that void, stories were born, stories of light, of warmth, of hope refusing to freeze. You pull the blankets around your shoulders again, half awake, half within that other realm. Outside, the frost thickens. Inside, your breath still curls into the air, pale and alive. Somewhere between them, in that fragile boundary where warmth meets winter, your dreams continue, unseen but unbroken. Morning deepens, and with it comes the realization that the cold isn't only outside. It's inside the castle, in the walls themselves, in the furniture, in the bones of the very building. Every surface you touch carries that same frozen memory. The stones seem to remember winter more clearly than they remember summer. You step down from the bed and place your feet on the floor. It's shockingly cold, the kind of cold that climbs the body like a vine. The rushes scattered across the stones provide only a thin defense. Beneath them lies centuries of frost and dust, sealed into the cracks. Each step echoes faintly, the sound small, fragile. In the Middle Ages, warmth was not a permanent state, it was a negotiation, constantly lost and re-won. The castle's walls were thick, sometimes 10 feet or more, meant to defy siege and fire. But they defied comfort just as well. Their mass stored the chill of the night, releasing it slowly throughout the day. The air that touched them cooled instantly, drifting like mist toward the floor. Even the tapestries, those grand woven hangings of hunts and saints, served less as decoration than insulation, soft armor against the breath of the stones. You touch one now? It's rough under your fingertips, heavy with age. The fabric gives slightly, but behind it, you can feel the wall's silent endurance, cold, unyielding. A castle's beauty, you realize, was built on hardship. For every torch that flickers, 1,000 stones wait, indifferent. Servants understood this truth better than their masters. They fought the cold not by changing it, but by outsmarting it. They placed straw in cracks, hung blankets where walls met floor, moved bedding to warmer corners as the wind shifted direction. Even food was arranged by temperature, all barrels near the hearth, salted meat against the inner wall, cheese in the half, frozen alcoves where time itself seemed to slow. The rhythm of survival wasn't ruled by clocks, but by the migration of heat. You cross to the hearth. The new fire burns weakly, its flames reluctant. The wood hisses, damp from snow brought in with it. A servant kneels nearby, coaxing it with steady patience. She doesn't look up. Her hands are red and raw from washing linens in icy water before dawn. She knows this battle will last all day, every hour a contest between flame and frost, between breath and stone. You sit nearby, feeling the slow crawl of warmth across your shins. It's never even. The front of you burns while your back remains cold. In medieval manuscripts, artists often painted winter scenes with figures half in shadow, half in light, as though even illumination were impossible. It wasn't symbolism, it was truth. The walls creak softly, as if responding. It's not imagination. The stones expand and contract as the fire spreads heat through the room. You can hear it, a slow, deliberate groan that sounds almost alive. Some said castles could feel their own coldness, that the groaning of the walls was the sound of their endurance. To sleep in one was to share that endurance, to become, if only briefly, part of the architecture's patience. In poorer homes, wooden beams served the same purpose. They swelled with damp, whispered as they dried. People learned to read those sounds like weather. A deep, hollow crack meant frost coming. A quick, high creak meant thaw. The house spoke, and those who listened survived. You stand and press your palm against the wall once more. It's cold enough to ache. You imagine the masons who laid these stones centuries ago, men with cracked hands, layering lime and sand in air so frigid their breath froze in their beards. Every block they placed trapped the winter within it. The walls you touch are monuments not only to strength, but to endurance. There's a saying among castle dwellers, old and half forgotten, the walls remember. They remember every storm, every fire, every whisper of those who leaned too close. In winter, they release those memories, the faint smell of smoke from battles long past, the cool breath of nights when even kings shivered. If you listen closely, you can almost hear them breathing. You lean in, ear against the stone. The vibration is subtle but real, the heartbeat of the structure itself. The wind outside howls, and the walls answer in a deep, muted tone. The sound passes through you, low and resonant. It feels like standing inside the chest of something ancient, something vast enough to hold all the nights that ever were. You realize that warmth here isn't about temperature, it's about persistence. The people who lived in these walls didn't expect comfort, they expected endurance. They understood that the cold was part of the architecture of existence, a constant like gravity. Fire wasn't meant to conquer it, only to remind them that life continued in spite of it. The servant beside you finally rises, brushing soot from her hands. The fire catches at last, brighter now, licking the logs with gold. The air begins to change, subtly, gently, a few feet closer to life. You thank her quietly. She nods once, then slips away to another room where another fire waits to be born. The walls continue to hum around you, their coldness undiminished, but held at bay. You sit in that balance between heat and frost, light and stone, past and present. You begin to understand why medieval people prayed so much, not always for salvation, but simply for warmth in the soul, if not in the air. You close your eyes. The stone behind you presses its chill into your back, while the fire warms your face. Between them, you exist perfectly balanced, one half flame, one half frost. And in that fragile symmetry lies the essence of life in the Middle Ages. To live within the cold, to make peace with it, to let it teach you endurance. When you open your eyes again, the light has changed. The fire glows brighter, and for a fleeting moment, even the stone seems to soften. The walls no longer feel like prison or monument, but companion, patient, ancient, and alive. Evening comes again. The cold returns as it always does, patient, certain, inevitable. But this time, you are ready. You know the rhythm of the castle now, the breathing of its walls, the language of smoke and frost. You know that the only true center of life here is not the throne, nor the chapel, nor the bed. It is the hearth. Every story in the castle begins and ends by the fire. By day, it cooks meals and dries clothes. By night, it gathers the living together like moths around a star. The hearth is the heart, the literal one, beating in red and gold, reminding every soul within these walls that warmth is not a luxury, but a promise kept. You move closer. The logs crack and spit, sparks rising into the hood of the chimney like fleeting prayers. The air smells of pine resin and oak smoke, sharp, sweet, ancient. This scent has followed humanity for thousands of years. It is the perfume of survival. Around the hearth, the castle's people assemble. A servant mends a tunic by firelight, her fingers deft and sure despite their cracks. A guard sits nearby, armor set aside, his face soft in the glow. The steward counts coins in silence, the metal glinting with every flicker. Even the hounds find their place, sprawling across the floor, their tails twitching in dreams. No one speaks much. The fire is conversation enough. It flickers across faces, drawing light into eyes and shadow into thought. You can feel the pulse of the flames, rhythmic and alive, as if it breathes in time with the room. In medieval life, the hearth was both tool and altar. Before every meal, people crossed themselves toward it. Before every journey, they touched its ashes for luck. When a newborn entered the world, the midwife carried it near the fire to introduce it to warmth, the first lesson in the fragile covenant between heat and life. And when someone died, a coal from that same fire was carried to the church, placed beside candles so that their spirit would not go cold on the road to heaven. You watch as the flames dance higher. Their colors shift, orange, yellow, blue at the base, where the heat is purest. Medieval thinkers believed fire had souls, each color a different temperament. Blue was wisdom, gold was courage, red was passion. Perhaps they were right. Watching this fire, it feels almost sentient, a being of moods, restless yet constant, mortal yet eternal. The old woman who tends the hearth mutters as she feeds it a fresh log. Her movements are reverent, her eyes half closed. You realize she is praying, though not to God. Her words are older than scripture, a litany to the fire itself. Burn true, burn slow, keep them safe, keep them warm. It's a prayer older than language, whispered by countless hands that once did the same. You remember how every other form of warmth, blankets, clothes, bodies, depends on this one source. The fire gives them all meaning. It is the origin from which comfort radiates outward, layer by layer, until it reaches even the coldest corners of the castle. Lose it, and the entire system collapses. No food, no light, no life. The medieval world revolved not around kings or cathedrals, but around flame. Outside, the wind howls, furious and unseen. It rattles the shutters, moans down the chimney, tests every seam of the stone. But the fire answers with a single steady crackle, defiance made sound. You realize that this, more than any wall or sword, is the castle's true defense. Someone throws a handful of herbs into the flames, rosemary, sage, and thyme. The scent rises, green and sharp, blending with the smoke. The light shifts again, softer now, more golden. The people around you relax, shoulders lowering. This small ritual, repeated night after night, binds them together. The fire is not merely heat, it is belonging. You reach out your hand. The warmth licks your skin, gentle but insistent. It feels personal, intimate, like the touch of another living thing. You remember all that the fire has done through the ages, cooked the first bread, forged the first blade, banished the first darkness. And now, centuries later, it still performs the same miracles, as if time itself were powerless against its hunger. There is a kind of peace here that doesn't exist anywhere else. The day's labor fades, the wind's rage muffles behind the walls, and all that remains is the quiet companionship of flame and flesh. You watch the servant's face soften as she finishes her mending. The guard's eyes grow heavy with sleep. Even the dog's sigh, content. The cold, for all its might, waits respectfully beyond the door. The old woman glances at you and smiles. Her face is a map of winters, her eyes two embers of their own. It's not the fire that keeps us alive, she says softly, as if reading your thoughts. It's that we keep it. You nod, she's right. The warmth of a medieval hearth was never a gift. It was a partnership. The people fed it wood and faith. In return, it fed them light and courage. Every day, every night, they renewed that pact, and through it, endured. The flames waver lower now, their edges softening. The woman rises and places a heavy iron lid over the coals, smothering them slowly. A thin stream of smoke escapes, coiling upward like a final breath. The fire is not dead, only sleeping. Beneath the ashes, its heart still glows, a red pulse that promises return. You realize then that this is how the people of these frozen centuries survived, not by conquering winter, but by mastering the art of rekindling. Every dawn, every season, every lifetime was just another act of bringing the fire back. You stand, take one last look at the hearth, and feel the quiet power of that truth settle into you. The warmth will fade, as it always does, but the memory of it will not. Outside, the snow falls soundlessly, blanketing the world in silence. Inside, the last ember flares, refusing to die. It glows faintly in the dark, a reminder that even in the coldest age, the heart of fire never truly goes out. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join our growing community here at Silent History Secrets. Every week, we uncover the calm, hidden stories of the past, perfect for relaxing, dreaming, and drifting into history's quiet mysteries. Until next time, sleep well and stay curious.